Welcome to Open Source Health. I'm Tripp Johnson, founder and social entrepreneur who spent the last decade trying to make healthcare a little more humane and accessible and a lot less soul-crushing. This show is about the real work of changing a broken system, from policy and strategy to using technology and AI in ways that actually help people. Whether it's intake forms, care teams, or back-end systems, we're digging into how healthcare can be built for real-world impact. Glad you're here. Today we're going meta and asking if modern healthcare is even built to help people flourish. Marcus and I get into why we're skeptical of traditional therapeutic models, why AI friendships give us the creeps, and why real connection matters more than ever. If you've ever felt like there's more to flourishing than apps, medication, or once a week Zoom therapy, this one is for you.
Hey,
here we go. A little cracking the sun-kissed.
trying so hard. One day sun-kissed.
This is flourishing.
Yeah, right. So how you doing? Anything interesting this week?
Oh man. Yeah, I mean we signed another psychiatrist on board. I'm really excited about from a work perspective. She's had a lot of big jobs in the past. One of the coolest things is during her residency when she was at Duke, she did all her substance use training under Dr. Book, who's going to be moving into like our chief medical officer role. And it was just really cool to meet someone that he trained that really wanted to work for him in the future, and also brings a new skill set to kind of our medical team, having been the chief medical officer at pretty large statewide organizations. So really excited about that. Plus her, one of her real areas of interest is this metabolic psychiatry that we've talked a little bit about, and just kind of rethinking the whole chemical imbalance and using prescriptions to treat all mental health diagnoses. So super excited about that on the professional front. And then, kind of more on the personal front, I'm less than a month from now, I'll be in Spain. So I'll be in Spain for a month, and that will be an interesting adventure with two young kids.
Yeah, and you won't be enjoying roast suckling pig because the vegan thing, man.
Yeah.
Ask you to eat some for me, but I don't think you will.
Look, if you behave well, there's a Costco Iberica Hemo that you could receive for Christmas next year. For $200, I can get you 10 pounds of that from Costco,
Yeah,
and it is uncle approved, and he's got a refined palate.
yeah.
So,
I don't have a refined palate, but I'll eat. Yeah, that's two sittings for me. 5 pounds of meat. That's good.
oh man. How about you? What's going on with you?
Man, it's been a fun week. I think we're playing around with new content stuff, and I think something that stuff gets me energized a little bit, like thinking a little more deeply about how to produce content that's maybe interesting and useful, and gives me a chance to like work out ideas and think about stuff. So I think it's interesting with this whole mental health awareness month. Like, everybody's dropping content and material and blogs and posts and that sort of thing. And I tend to just find most of that stuff not that interesting necessarily to me. I also know I'm kind of a weird guy and have esoteric interests in the sense that I'm probably not the intended audience, but it's fun kind of playing around with that. Like, how do we express ourselves, our general thoughts and philosophy around healthcare and what it is to kind of live a good life and get good treatment, and what does that look like? Personally, I've been on the mats in like 4 straight days in a while, and I'm beat, man. So got a couple of students who are going to be competing pretty soon, so been laying it on them. It's been pretty fun, but
You've been laying on your students?
yeah, dude, it's jiu-jitsu. That's what you
Oh,
do.
yeah, I forgot. Yep.
Not Yeah, we wear pajamas, dude. It's fine. It's good, dude.
Wait, hold on. Here's a really important debate I had. Like, what constitutes pajamas? Like, what
Gee.
makes something pajamas versus
Oh yeah.
clothes? I had
Oh,
this debate with my wife the other night. She's like, my pajamas. I was like, that's a t-shirt.
right. Yeah.
I was like, if you wear it to bed, you can call them like pajamas, I guess, but it's still a t-shirt. It's like a square rectangle kind of thing. I don't know.
I don't know. I think that's an important distinction because otherwise you end up like going to the store in your pajamas, and you don't want to be that person.
Right, but like I got her this t-shirt from like a bakery we used to go to. It's still a t-shirt. People wear it as a t-shirt. It's not pajamas. And it really bothered me.
Yeah. I mean, this. I think this is a semantic question for the ages, and I don't have any. I've not done the sufficient legwork on it. I'm a pair of workout shorts and go to bed kind of guy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't call those pajamas though.
Yeah, I don't either. All right. Question for the ages. Speaking of ham-fisted segue, let's go. Question for the ages.
So yeah, we were riffing a little before this, and I said what I was gonna kick it to you. I think in light of this Mental Health Awareness Month for us, a lot of what we want to talk about is um, the idea of like what do we want to see out of people? What is it like to live a good life? And as an organization, we've recently articulated all of our kind of core values and our philosophy and did a lot of work to make it more personal and authentic to the unique aspects of what we're trying to do. And I think some of that means pushing back against prevailing narratives within the behavioral health field that more therapy is always positive. More people need to pathologize their feelings. And I think what we want to do and what we want to equip our patients with is a resiliency and an internal understanding of what they can do to live a good life at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'm particularly interested in that. And this is it's interesting, right? Like over the years, I think you and I have had these various iterations of these sort of ideas or these thoughts, but like the common thread in all of this, and it's like all over our material. You probably have signs, that posters and stuff you've made. This idea of eudaimonia, which is just like if you were a philosophy 101 major, it's something you can remember and hang your hat on, and people will think you're really smart. But essentially, this Greek ideal of like of human flourishing, and what does that sort of look like? And I think one of the things, personally, that I got really interested in, ultimately, what led me to I think becoming a therapist initially was getting exposed to some like classical Aristotelian ideas of human flourishing, right? So most of the classics were interested in the question of what is it to be a good man, a good person, a good human, and that was the orienting sort of like that's what mattered for philosophy. It wasn't deeply existential. It was just what is it to be a good human, a good citizen, and the reason for that is like they were fundamentally interested in this idea of happiness, and so I think what's fascinating about that is like in some sense, like we really just do kind of know what it is to be a happy human being. Like we see happy human beings, and when we say happiness, and when I say happiness, I don't mean this like hedonic explosion, right? Like I mean something that's a little more deep, a little more abiding, like a general sense of like wellness with yourself, your community, the world, whatever those things sort of mean. Um, so you've talked a lot, and you've really dialed in on this around the algorithms, around technology, around what you're kind of seeing, and I think in particular young men, but just healthcare sort of in general, or just overall mental health. And so that's my kind of volley to you is where do you see modernity right now in conflict with some of those ideals? And we can define what those ideals are if that's helpful for you.
Well, I'm going to go back to the Scott Galloway quote that I use over and over, but since we only have a few listeners, they'll just get to hear another time. We have Paleolithic brains, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. And so I think the parallel that it brings to mind for me is I believe in growing an organization. Part of my role is just to titrate the different functions or departments within the company. Like if we were the best, I did the best treatment possible, but couldn't market and couldn't acquire patients, then we wouldn't help anyone.
Yeah,
And if we were doing great treatment, but we weren't able to collect money, we're going to go out of business. So a lot of this is keeping things in balance. So from that, the question that you posed, how is modernity, maybe in conflict with human ideals of flourishing? I think that it's great that we have cutting edge technology and there's a lot of promise in it, but that it's rewiring. Technology is rewiring the way that we process information, how we understand ourselves and our relationship to others.
yeah,
Um, and so I think there's a real conflict with us and technology, and we keep leaning in on technology to help solve problems, but a lot of the problems that we're looking to solve may be inflicted by the same technology we want to solve our own problems.
yeah. I think Derek Thompson's a guy that's been really dialed in on this topic in particular in a way that's I think started giving me the language to think about this. And this general idea of like the loneliness epidemic is the way that he sort of coined it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I think about these things, I think about like humans in this like hedonic cocoon, like a hedonic cocoon or something, right? Like we don't actually we can have the semblance of community, we can have the semblance of flourishing, the semblance of connection, all of these sort of things, and yet be completely detached from any practical application of that stuff, right? Like it becomes this thing that we're just sort of isolated in versus a part of or contributing or being a part, like connected to our fellow man and community in a way that's meaningful. And so, like, I think that's like pretty interesting idea, right? Like, we're simultaneously seemingly most connected that you've ever been, right? And like, you can fire a text off to a friend that you may never see or you will never see and never spend time with. You can have engagements, shoot memes, do all this sort of stuff back and forth. Fundamentally, still be disconnected from that in a sort of way that would create meaning, purpose, connection, right?
Mm-hmm. Was there a question there?
No, just a reflection, just a thought. Like, yeah,
Yeah. What are we going to do about it?
I don't know. That's what I'm interested in, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
how do we've connected around this idea of like, how do you, like, what would a healthcare system that was oriented towards flourishing actually look like? But I think we kind of we skip a more basic question in that, and is healthcare the vehicle for providing a path to flourishing?
Yeah, so I got a lot of thoughts, and let's try and disentangle a few of these. So one, like I think we're predominantly our system is set up for sick care, not health care. All of the CPT codes, all of the structure is geared towards the complexity of what's presenting and how we're addressing that. So there's not a ton of incentive for the healthcare system to help people flourish in the traditional sense.
Yeah,
I think like largely we're set up to get people back to neutral. Uh, and I don't know if there's like great data on, if we focused on that kind of idea of flourishing more, if we could save the healthcare system money or have better outcomes. I think those are like deeply fascinating, uh, thoughts. I do know like a lot of people who are frustrated from building within the system say that they want to do it outside the system, right? Like with the concierge, whether it's concierge primary care,
yeah,
um, you've got cash pay practices, and I do think you can do a lot of this within the system, and I think that's what we're trying to build, and we're trying to articulate, some sort of vision for an egalitarian style of healthcare that does promote flourishing.
yeah.
The issues are it's a lot harder because if part of flourishing is in a capitalist society is making money to be able to afford to do the things you want, you got to make money.
Yeah,
And your team wants to make more money. And the sicker the people you're treating, the more money you're going to make to some extent.
yeah,
So, so that is one of the really tough, things set up for, kind of from the beginning. But then I think back to your question, the question being, where is modernity coming into conflict with flourishing? And I think a ton about this loneliness piece, and we've talked about community, and I think that the more addictive the algorithms we're participating with, life alongside or living through to some extent, depending on your age, the more you're becoming isolated, the more lonely you are, the more the pseudo connection feels like the real thing. So you start to potentially build a relationship in your head with the content creators that
right.
you're consuming, right?
Yeah,
For us, like you just mentioned Derek Thompson, and it's like, so we've nerded out over his podcast and some of his, podcasts he's been on with Ezra Klein promoting their new book. And the funny thing is, right, like I found out this weekend, it sounds like he lives down the road from me.
yeah,
And the chances of me like interacting with him are fairly high if I made an effort.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
I
but instead, like we're sitting here like, oh, well, Derek Thompson said this and that last week. And it's like, yeah, I guess my neighbor did say that or something, and we don't know our neighbors, right? We know internet personalities better than the people that we live beside. And so we're just like a lot of things, it's like it's approximating the reality that we need to flourish long term, and it's approximating it better and better, but it's like the itch you can't scratch. And so I don't know that healthcare is the vehicle to address all of this, but I do think like it's part of our role as leaders in mental health to at least help people become aware of some of these paradigms and to not look for what I'll call the quick fix. And the quick fix may not be quick, but it may be an hour of therapy in perpetuity, or it may be SSRIs in perpetuity, or whatever cocktail of psychiatric prescriptions you're on to get up and to go to bed and
yeah,
whatever else. So I think it's tough, and I think it's really going to get worse. And I think where this becomes problematic is there is going to be more attention put on the mental health system to help people
yeah,
solve problems that society caused, and that the healthcare system may not actually be that well situated to address.
yeah. And I think something that's even more fundamental to this is that perhaps healthcare's role isn't to actually solve for this, right? So, like, let's just take some of, if we were to define what we think like a healthy human looks like, right? Like just a baseline healthy human. It's probably someone that's living a pretty balanced life. They're engaging in intellectual pursuits. They're probably someone that has some hobbies. They're someone that's moderately physically active. They probably have a family. They probably have some sort of activities or community that they feel belonging and connection to. Um, and they're probably engaged in those sort of pursuits and activities. And I'm just not sure how healthcare delivers that, right? Like there's ways to incentivize that. Maybe there's ways to sort of foster that or build that, or encourage that, or try to have people leverage that all intervention. I just don't see. I'm not sure how anything sort of would substitute for that, right? Like I don't know how you. I don't. This proxy piece about it too that you're sort of alluding to, because I know Meta this week sort of announced that they're trying to push these AI friends. It's like, yeah, that's about as dystopian as it gets, man. Like, and so again, you're talking about this approximation or simulation of the like of the requisite pieces to be a successful human being. So it's like, well, it's way easier to access by AI for. and engage with my AI friend versus like going out into the world and doing something or dealing with the roughness or the insecurities and uncomfortableness of that versus like I have this AI friend. And they may not be the same thing. Maybe gets me 20% of the same thing, but it's giving me 20% of the same thing with 90% less effort. And we're often just going to devolve into that. So I think it's an interesting because I don't know how healthcare solves for this other sort of stuff, and maybe it doesn't get much beyond being a good community partner, and you know, in some sort of capacity. That's it. That's what it can.
Well, let's. This may take us down a different rabbit hole, and you may just have to pull us back out quickly, instead of indulging me. But one of the things I've seen a lot of on LinkedIn, especially, is kind of therapist influencers bashing AI and
Yeah,
and bashing the idea that AI would replace therapy,
yeah,
and talking about how special it is to be a therapist and how hard it is to become a therapist. Since I'm not a therapist, it feels somewhat disingenuous to say it's easy
yeah.
to go to school and to receive the appropriate supervision. But
Right.
I think it's like with anything, if you want to do it, you
Yeah,
can do it, and the quality varies widely.
yeah.
And so one of the things that I think is interesting, um, is like, what can we be getting from AI and what can we not be getting from it? And evolving as a field in light of the fact that a lot of people are going to be leveraging AI, maybe not specifically as a therapist, but in these relationships. And how do we actually draw a meaningful distinction between therapy and AI in order to flourish?
And I want to take this one layer above this, right? So therapists that are complaining about the or railing against the idea of AI replacing them, right? In some sort of way, there's this concept called simulacrum, right? Like
Hmm.
the simulation of a simulation of a simulation, and that's a really esoteric sort of thing. But it's like it's what we're talking about is these approximations, right? Like if the core of human flourishing is like community balance, right? All these sort of like meaningful pursuits, right? In some ways, like there's a gap in that, there's a hole in that, there's something you're not getting from that. And so that leads you to see a therapist, right? So you go see
Hmm.
a therapist. But an therapist is an approximation of some element of this that's missing.
Hmm.
Not the thing. And they can't fix the thing. And they'll never be able to fix the thing. But they're an approximation of that thing. And then on that continuum, AI potentially becomes another lesser continuum of that that's seeking to replace whatever's missing in this core pursuit of being like flourishing humanity. And so I see it as this we're getting into these derivatives of really what's the essence of something, right?
Let me try and tease something out. So the I kind of lost my train of thought there, but what my head goes to is the difference between therapy and coaching,
Mm.
which we talked about a little bit
Yeah,
before.
yeah,
But I mean, I like, quite frankly, I don't have a great definition for the difference, and I've often found some of that to be a strained kind of
yeah,
analogy or comparison.
right.
That the goal of both is kind of the idea that you're going to help someone flourish, you're going to help them achieve what they need to. And I like to be clear, there is a difference between therapy and coaching. A lot
Yeah,
of therapists, and I think the same influencer was talking about how it's bad that people are becoming therapists and then marketing themselves as coaches so they don't have to abide by the same standards, or they can charge more, or they can work across state lines. And to me, like, at the end of the day, like, I'm interested in the best value for whatever I'm trying to achieve. So if flourishing is the ideal and a coach is going to help me and it's cheaper than a therapist, then I'm going to go with the coach. If it's more expensive than a therapist and the therapist is going to help me, I'm going to go with the therapist. I'm
yeah,
going to
yeah,
go
yeah.
with the best value I can get. And so, yeah, I guess like the goal should be flourishing to me. And I do believe you and I have sometimes a little bit of skepticism towards certain aspects of therapy or orientations to therapy because they are the construct zoo that we've talked about. So could you maybe like try and tease that out? Like, where do you see that becoming problematic in therapy? Um, the construct zoo component and maybe tying in like TikTok diagnosis type things.
Yeah. So I think a construct zoo becomes really, so let's try to define like what a construct is, right? Like a construct is an idea that forms in your brain or this representation of something, right? Like it becomes this idea. And so you could take something like EMDR, right? Like, and the idea with EMDR, or maybe CBT is even a better example, right? Like you take this, there's nothing inherent or fixed about a thought that you would go after with CBT, right? Like it's not, it's a mental construction that happens in the moment. You have this thought, it's tied to anxiety. And so CBT becomes this sort of broad tool for attacking that sort of thing. We've ended up now with a lot of additional sort of therapies that are coming second, third, fourth wave of like CBT or these other sort of things that would allow us to go after thoughts or feelings or that sort of thing. But the problem is all of this stuff is just stuff that they're just ideas or thoughts or things that arise, right? And then we give name to them, we give language to them, and so it becomes this representation of something, but it's just never the actual thing and whatever, right? And so I'm not sure that I'm even doing a great job of explaining that, but where I think this becomes difficult is in therapy. Very often, your tool is a construct going after a construct, right? Like the idea of
Mm-hmm.
is having a tool to attack some sort of construct that arises into someone's brain, right, or their mind. The issue with that is lots of things arise in our minds all the time, right? Like there's any given moment, you can have thoughts arising, feelings arising, that sort of stuff. And so you're trying to attack this something as if it is a thing versus this flowing of experience or something. And so I think oftentimes therapy can be not as effective because of that, right? Like you're trying to attack these concepts or these ideas that arise in any given moment, versus something like sometimes like a coach just becomes much more directive. Right? Tells you need to approach this thing, and you need to try it, and we'll go from there. It becomes a much more.
Yeah. Let me take a stab at this. I think that there's a mythical element sometimes to therapy that
Mhm.
doesn't exist outside of that relationship.
Yeah,
I think that you could say the same thing with spirituality too. Like anytime you're going to someone as an expert, and because really what you are asking in some ways is like, give me some better constructs to replace my existing constructs with, right? And maybe the opposite of that, like both you and I have a soft spot for behaviorism, um, and really believe that incentives matter
hmm
and that a lot of behavior is shaped by incentives. And I think coaches kind of go more directly to, hey, this is what you want to accomplish. Let's set up goals and let's check in to see how you're doing towards accomplishing the goal that you set out for.
yeah,
The difference sometimes with therapy is, well, let's dig into a lot of things as to why they may be getting in the way of you achieving your goals.
mm,
So you're, instead of like, you want to show up, you have a boss or a coworker who um is shutting you down, and you don't have the confidence to step up and say what you need to, or in that professional setting. And so a coach may work with you on, hey, direct communication skills, etc. A therapist may look too much into, well, what was your relationship with your mother like, your father like? And that very well, to me, in my mind, may play a big role in the dynamics you're playing out. But what you still have to do is change your behavior in the moment. It's not
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah,
not what happens in the therapy room necessarily. Yeah, and again, I think there's great value in understanding your history.
yeah,
But there's that direct, like, hey, like, let's just go try and change this problem versus let's dig into a lot of the thoughts and the underlying issues, because you can just get stuck there. And then
yeah,
you can just really get stuck. And then we forgot about you actually working towards your goal. Now we're just gaining all of this insight into your past and how it's affecting the person you are, and how all of these other people were the villains and you're a victim, and now you're just, acting out that construct even more, um even though that was the thing you were trying to avoid. You're using that, I don't want to say as an, yeah, I'll just use the word as an excuse. You're saying, hey, like, look, my I had a really a toxic relationship with my older brother, and it led me to not have confidence, so I'm just not a confident person. And the only way to become a confident person is to have the reps done so that you're confident in the result that you're going to achieve next. And I think that's like one of the fundamental things. Like, you just actually have to go out there and live life in order to flourish long term. It's not going to happen in a room on a video call once a week. It's the stuff that happens,
yeah.
throughout life.
I think about to maybe tie that together, right? Like to tie that point together. And as you were talking, the thing that came to my mind is this is where healthcare or counseling, therapy, behavioral health stuff was always going to fall short in terms of mental health improvement, right? Like, is it can never be a replacement for going out and actually doing the thing.
Hmm.
So, on a personal level, I was kind of down earlier this week. I was struggling with just whatever, like life stuff, just popping in, and just tired, exhausted, worn down, and ended up at jiu-jitsu. Have a couple of teammates that I'm trying to help get ready and prepare for a couple of tournaments, and had a couple of really hard nights of training. Felt good, and we ended up sitting around for about 30 45 minutes after class talking, not about anything in particular, nothing deep, nothing particularly personal, but just having a genuine sort of communication, and then heartfelt appreciation for each other in that moment. And a lot of it was just telling jokes, laughing, busting on each other. And I left there in a completely different sort of afterglow and sense of connection and feeling of belonging. Like, no matter what else is going on in my life, no matter what else I'm sort of struggling, I'm something and a part of this thing, be it ever so small. And you can't replace that. I don't know how you replace that. I don't think there is any way of replacing that. I don't, in therapy, coaching, behavioral health, mental health, maybe it can point you in that direction, right? Like, it can steer you and say, that's where you got to go. I can't take you there, but this
Hmm.
direction and the orientation, that is your north. That's your true north. That is human flourishing is there.
Hmm.
I can't be the one to pick you up and carry you there. Our conversations are going to be of limited value other than me continuing to reorient you towards that thing. And then you've got to do
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I really like that idea. It just that, and even just the part of the big roles of a therapist or any sort of mental health provider. I'll use the example on the, a psychiatrist or psychiatric provider who may be using prescription as part of the tools. And, like, I think I've always heard Dr. Book say, this is going to help you so that you can do the things that you need to be doing anyway, right? This is not a replacement. This is going to help you hopefully get back to neutral, get back to a place where you can make some of the lifestyle changes that you need to support your flourishing. But and I don't want to call it a crutch, but it's going to help you now. And for some people that may be for, a very long time or in perpetuity. but the idea that I just think there is this problem that is happening, and especially with younger generations, and I think even like our generation now, and kind of like raising the next generation, where we are overly pathologizing feelings, and a lot of people haven't had like real struggle, and so we're not as resilient as we used to be.
Hmm.
And and it's just I think it's problematic because I don't think I talk to anyone who doesn't have a therapist now.
Yeah.
Which means like their primary response to something going on with their kid is probably going to be a therapist or a psychiatrist. And as I think about like growing up, and like I'm thinking about like my daughter who's exhibiting just got caught shoplifting today for the first time at 3 years old. My wife told her like she can't take a pen from the bookstore. Well, she just took a pen and put it in her pocket, and then she's sitting there at lunch, playing with something in her pocket. My wife's like, "What are you doing?" And then she's like, "Show me what's in your pocket." And she pulls out the pen she wasn't supposed to take. And so then my wife's like, "Okay, well, now we can go up to your piggy bank. We can get money out of your piggy bank, and we're going to go back to the store and we're going to buy this pen.
Right.
And you're going to learn a lesson about that." And I
Yeah.
think that's like a great way to handle it. And I don't think many parents are like, "I got to get my kid in therapy. They're a kleptomaniac."
Yeah. Yeah.
But like when you start to think about like what that kid's probably going to do in a few years, like you can go the pathologizing route, or you can go the like, yeah, like this is part of your personality and we need to learn how to operate with the rules of society. But like if you're not committing some vandalism when you're in high school, like what are you doing? If you're not jaywalking, like I mean, why are you wasting your life? Like that God wasn't keeping score that you waited for that, walk sign to come on.
Yeah. Be a little bold. It makes
Yeah.
sense. It could be okay.
So I think there's I just hope that like we as an organization, and maybe I'll just tie that back in as we kind of wrap up to our new psychiatrist who's starting. I do think there's an element of so I'm wary of the constructs, right?
Yeah.
Um, but like we're all living with them. Language is an abstraction of reality. It's the best thing we've got to communicate with each other. But if we can marry that with actual kind of like more than self-report, I think that's what's so problematic sometimes about mental health is so much is just driven on self-report, and there's so much emphasis on validation
Yeah.
as opposed to creating dissonance. And I think creating dissonance is an important part of the therapeutic relationship, just as it is to validate a feeling. We need to create some dissonance. But like what I get really excited about is the idea that we can leverage like personalized insights, whether that's from wearables like an Aura Ring or an Apple Watch that may be monitoring sleep, with actual blood work to show how our body's processing certain nutrients. I don't know what blood work does. Let me be clear, but I hear like there's a lot of stuff you can learn from blood work, and it's important. And I'm going to the primary care for the first time in 5 years next week, so hopefully I'll know more then.
Yeah.
But like I am really excited that there are emerging other theories about how we treat mental health. And I think that there's a lot that society has gotten wrong.
Yeah.
Uh from again, we're isolated, we're on our phones, and telling someone to just get off their phone isn't really going to be effective.
Yeah.
And I think like the same thing we've talked about in like substance use treatment. Like I think sometimes if you showed a guy like, hey, like your testosterone level is really low and it's going to have these negative impacts, and this is due to your whatever consumption, then they might be more likely to make behavior change based on that evidence than just analyzing what led them to drink, how did they feel, what was the trigger.
Yeah.
And I think like if we can marry some of that, like truly, we talk about doing a biopsychosocial, but
Hmm.
isn't it crazy that we
Yeah.
train clinicians and physicians to do a biopsychosocial assessment that takes no biological information from them other than the words they're using. So
Right.
to do a biopsychosocial, don't you have to draw blood?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think like as we move on, and I think as we develop, I'm interested in seeing how we can marry some of the physical health um, information that we can gather and marry that with how we're feeling throughout the day. What leads to, what are some of the mechanisms truly at play beneath the surface, but not beneath the surface in the super ego or the
Right.
whatever else.
Yeah, not the constructs beneath the surface, but what's
Right.
actually,
Like the literal, like
yeah, the
what's
biology.
mechanically happening.
Yeah.
And because these mechanical happenings in our body lead us to feel certain things. And
Yes.
there's not enough emphasis on that biological component. And like if we're not able to process certain proteins or amino acids, or we're deficient, or we can't process folate, all of those things can lead to, if you have a inability to process folate correctly, you can feel very depressed and lethargic, and you just need a supplement that's going to change that. And that's the kind of thing that like we're not even, the healthcare system, at least the behavioral health system, is not set up to uncover that. I hope we do in the future.
Yeah. And that become, I think if we set, to answer the initial question we started off with, just to put a point on this, right? Like maybe that is the role of healthcare, behavioral healthcare, is to be able to integrate more of that stuff so that someone can actually be oriented and pushed in the direction of human flourishing.
Yeah, I like that. I like the idea that um, at our best in the healthcare system, behavioral health will help us close the gap between what's going on in the physical world, in our physical bodies, and what we are experiencing subjectively in our minds.
Yes. Nice.
That feels like a good place to wrap.
Perfect, right?
All right. Well, until next time, I'll see you, man.
See you, dude.
Flourishing is messy. No algorithm or practice can give it to you, but you can get help moving in the right direction. If this episode sparked something, subscribe and share. Until next time.